The illusion of earning more. What if the real problem isn't your income, but the way your life quietly expands the moment you start earning more? Because for most people across the United States and Europe, something subtle but powerful happens over time. They work harder, they get promoted, their salary increases, but their financial situation? It barely improves. And after a few years, they start asking a question that feels uncomfortable to admit. Why do I still feel stuck even though I earn more than ever? Let's look at a simple, realistic situation. Imagine a 26-year-old starting their first proper job. They earn around $50,000 a year. After taxes, that leaves them with roughly $3,200 per month. At this stage, life is relatively controlled. They rent a small apartment or share space, costing around $1,100. Groceries and basic utilities take another $500. Transportation, maybe public transit or an older car, costs about $300. Student loan payments sit at $300, and for everything else, small outings, clothes, occasional treats, they spend around $400. At the end of the month, they manage to save about $600. Not impressive, but stable. Now fast forward a few years. They're 31 now. They've gained experience, maybe switched jobs once or twice. Their salary has grown to $80,000 per year. After taxes, that's around $4,800 per month. On the surface, this looks like progress, a clear step forward. But something else has changed too, quietly, almost invisibly. Their lifestyle. The small apartment is gone. Now they're living in a better neighborhood, paying $1,800 in rent. The old car has been replaced. Now there's a monthly payment around $500. Groceries haven't just increased because of inflation, they've upgraded their habits. More convenience, more eating out, less planning. That $500 category becomes $800. Subscriptions appear. Streaming services, gym memberships, upgraded phone plans, another $300 to $400 disappears there. And slowly, without any major decision, their new monthly structure looks like this. Rent, $1,800, living expenses, $800, transportation, $600, loans, $300, lifestyle spending, $800. Total, around $4,300, which leaves them saving almost the same amount as before. Maybe $500, maybe $600. And this is where the illusion begins. Because from the outside, everything looks better. Better home, better car, better lifestyle. But underneath, financial progress has barely moved. The extra income didn't create freedom. It created a more expensive version of the same life. And most people don't even notice when this transition happens. It feels natural, it feels deserved, it feels like progress. But in reality, this is the exact moment where financial growth quietly slows or completely stops. And the most surprising part? It doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like success. The system you don't notice. At this point, most people come to a simple conclusion. I just need to earn more. It sounds logical, even responsible, because if your expenses are high, then increasing your income should solve the problem. But this is where things become slightly uncomfortable. Because for many people, income is not the real issue. The real issue is what happens after the income arrives. Let's go back to the same person. They're now earning $80,000 a year, and they genuinely believe they're doing better than before. And in some ways they are. Their environment has improved. Their daily life feels more comfortable. They've removed certain financial stresses. But something else has quietly entered their life. fixed obligations. Not big, dramatic ones, just small monthly commitments that feel manageable on their own. A $500 car payment, a $200 upgrade in rent, a few subscriptions at $10 or $20 each, higher grocery bills from convenience and habits. Individually, none of these feel like mistakes, but together they create a structure, a system. And this system has one defining characteristic: it absorbs income. Every time more money comes in, it finds a place to go. Not because someone is irresponsible, but because modern life is designed this way. You're constantly presented with upgrades. A better apartment closer to work, a safer car with financing options, more convenient food after long workdays, experiences that feel worth it because you've worked hard. And the most important detail, almost everything is offered in monthly terms. Not full price, not total cost, just a number that fits comfortably into your current income. So instead of thinking, "Can I afford this overall?" you start thinking, "Can I handle this per month?" And most of the time, the answer is yes. That's how the system expands around you, quietly, gradually, without ever feeling like a big decision. And this is where people get trapped, not necessarily in debt, but in commitments. Because once your lifestyle is built on fixed monthly costs, your flexibility disappears. You can't easily downgrade your rent. You can't instantly remove a car payment. You can't reverse lifestyle habits overnight. So even though your income increased, your freedom didn't. In fact, in many cases, it decreased. Because now you're responsible for maintaining a higher standard of living. And this creates a subtle pressure. You have to keep earning. You have to keep performing. You have to keep up. Not to grow, just to maintain. And this is the part most people never question. Because from the outside, everything looks stable, but underneath, the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's keeping you financially busy without letting you move forward.
The math people avoid. At this stage, nothing feels obviously wrong. You're earning well, your bills are paid, you're not struggling, so naturally you assume you're on the right track. But this is exactly where a quiet misunderstanding begins, because financial progress doesn't come from income alone. It comes from what remains after your lifestyle is paid for. And most people never slow down to actually look at that number. Let's go back to our example again. At $50,000 per year, this person was saving around $600 per month. That's $7,200 per year. Now, at $80,000 per year, they're saving roughly the same, maybe $600, maybe slightly more. Let's be generous and say $700 per month. That's $8,400 per year. Now pause for a moment. Their income increased by $30,000, but their annual savings increased by only $1,200. That's the part people don't calculate. Because the increase in lifestyle feels justified, and the remaining savings feels acceptable. But over time, this small gap becomes everything. Let's stretch this out over 10 years. At $7,200 per year, consistently saved and invested at a modest return, you might end up with around $100,000. At $8,400 per year, maybe around $120,000. Now compare that to an alternative. Same person, same income, but instead of allowing lifestyle to expand fully, they control it. They increase their expenses slightly, but not dramatically. And instead of saving $700 per month, they save $1,500. That's $18,000 per year. Over 10 years, at the same modest return, that grows to roughly $250,000. Not because they worked harder, not because they earned more, but because they protected the gap between income and lifestyle. This is where the real difference is created. Not in the big decisions, but in the quiet, repeated ones. The extra $300 here, the upgraded habit there, the "it's just a small increase" mindset. Individually, these don't feel important, but mathematically, they compound in the opposite direction. Instead of building wealth, they reduce your ability to build it. And the most uncomfortable part is, you won't notice this in the short term. In fact, for years, everything will feel fine. You'll travel, you'll upgrade your life, you'll feel like you're progressing, until one day you compare yourself not to your past, but to what you could have had. And that gap, it doesn't come from bad luck. It comes from numbers that were never examined closely. Because in personal finance, it's not the income that changes your future. It's the portion of income that never gets touched. And for most people, that number stays smaller than they realize. The psychology behind the pattern. By now, the numbers are clear. The gap between income and lifestyle is what determines real financial progress. And yet, most people still allow that gap to disappear, not because they don't understand money, but because of how human behavior works. Because this isn't just a financial pattern, it's a psychological one. Let's go back to our example again. When this person first started earning, their lifestyle felt basic. They made trade-offs, they delayed purchases, they were more intentional. But as their income increased, something subtle happened. Their standard changed. What once felt like a luxury now feels normal. And what once felt normal now feels like a downgrade. This is known as adaptation. You don't stay impressed by improvements, you adjust to them very quickly. That better apartment? It only feels exciting for a few months. The new car? After some time, it just becomes your car. The higher income? It stops feeling like progress and starts feeling expected. And once something becomes your normal, it becomes psychologically uncomfortable to go backward, even if going backward is financially smarter. But there's another layer to this, and it's even more powerful. Social comparison. You don't measure your life in isolation. You measure it against the people around you. Your coworkers upgrade their lifestyle. You notice. Your friends move to better areas. You notice. People your age start traveling more, buying better things, living differently. And without realizing it, your internal benchmark shifts. You're no longer comparing yourself to where you started. You're comparing yourself to what feels standard in your environment. And this creates quiet pressure. Not obvious pressure, not forced, but constant. You don't want to fall behind, even if falling behind just means living slightly below your means. Then comes the final piece, justification. Every upgrade feels reasonable. You work hard, so you deserve a better place. You commute daily, so a better car makes sense. You're busy, so convenience spending feels acceptable. And none of these are wrong on their own. That's what makes this pattern so difficult to notice, because it's not built on bad decisions, it's built on justified ones. And this is why most people never feel like they're making a mistake, because emotionally, they aren't. They're improving their quality of life. They're rewarding their effort. They're aligning with their environment. But financially, something else is happening in the background. Every time lifestyle rises to match income, the opportunity to build long-term freedom quietly disappears. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, consistently, over time. And by the time most people realize this, their lifestyle is already fixed, their expenses are already structured, their habits are already formed, which makes change feel harder than it actually is. Not because it's mathematically difficult, but because it's psychologically uncomfortable. And that's the real reason this pattern continues. Not lack of knowledge, but the quiet power of human behavior. A different way to think about money. Up to this point, nothing we've discussed requires extreme discipline. There's no complicated strategy here, no advanced financial knowledge, just a simple observation. Most people allow their lifestyle to grow at the same speed as their income, and over time, that decision quietly limits their future. But not everyone approaches money this way. Some people, without earning dramatically more, end up in a very different position. Not because they avoid spending entirely, but because they think about money differently. When their income increases, they don't react immediately. They pause, not out of fear, but out of awareness. Instead of asking, "What can I upgrade now?" they ask something slightly uncomfortable. What actually needs upgrading? And most of the time, the honest answer is very little. This doesn't mean they stay stuck in the same lifestyle forever. They still improve their life, but they do it selectively. They understand something most people overlook. Not all expenses behave the same way. Some expenses are flexible. You can adjust them anytime. Eating out, travel, entertainment. These don't lock you in. But others are fixed. Rent, car payments, long-term commitments. Once these increase, they become part of your baseline, and reducing them later feels like losing progress. So instead of upgrading everything at once, financially aware people choose carefully. Maybe they move to a slightly better place but delay upgrading their car, or they allow themselves better experiences but keep their fixed costs stable. This creates a small but powerful difference, because every time income increases, a gap begins to form. Not a huge one, but a noticeable one. And instead of closing that gap with lifestyle, they leave it open. They let it grow. At first, it doesn't look impressive. There's no visible change, no dramatic shift in lifestyle. In fact, from the outside, they might look like they're not progressing as fast as others. But underneath, something very different is happening. They're building flexibility, options, breathing room. Over time, this gap starts to compound, not just financially, but psychologically. Because when your expenses don't rise as fast as your income, you feel less pressure, less dependency on your paycheck, less urgency to constantly earn more just to maintain your life. And that changes how you think. Now decisions aren't driven by necessity, they're driven by choice. You're not asking, "How do I afford this life?" You're asking, "Is this life even worth the cost?" And that's the real shift, not in numbers, but in perspective. Because once you see money this way, lifestyle stops being something you automatically upgrade and becomes something you intentionally design. And over years, this approach leads to a very different outcome. Not louder, not more visible, but far more stable. Because instead of building a life that constantly demands more income, you build one that quietly gives you more control. And in the long run, that control is what most people were actually chasing all along. The quiet outcome most people miss. If you step back and look at all of this from a distance, the pattern becomes clear. Most people don't fail financially because they earn too little. They struggle because their lifestyle evolves in a way that keeps them in place. Not struggling, not falling behind dramatically, but also not moving forward in any meaningful way. And over time, this creates a life that feels stable on the surface, but fragile underneath. Because when your income is fully absorbed by your lifestyle, you lose something important. Not money, but flexibility. The ability to make decisions without immediate financial pressure. The ability to step back, change direction, or take a risk without everything collapsing. Think about it this way. Two people earn the same amount, same city, same opportunities. One has built a life where most of their income is committed. Rent is high, car payments are fixed, lifestyle is fully upgraded. They're comfortable but dependent. The other has allowed a gap to exist. Their lifestyle is slightly below what they could afford, not dramatically, just intentionally. And that small difference creates something invisible: breathing room. In the short term, this difference doesn't look significant. Both live decent lives, both enjoy their income, both appear successful from the outside. But over time, the outcomes slowly separate. The first person continues to rely on their income to sustain their life. Every decision is connected to maintaining that structure. Renting jobs feels risky. Taking time off feels expensive. Even small disruptions feel stressful because there's no margin. The second person experiences something different. Because their expenses are controlled, their income is not fully consumed, and that creates options. They can walk away from situations that don't work. They can take breaks without immediate panic. They can make decisions based on long-term thinking, not short-term survival. And this is the part that often goes unnoticed because it doesn't show up in obvious ways. There's no visible status symbol for financial flexibility, no external validation for having margin. In fact, from the outside, it can look like you're doing less, spending less, holding back. But in reality, you're building something most people overlook: a life that doesn't demand constant maintenance, a structure that doesn't rely on perfect conditions, a system that works quietly in your favor. And the interesting part is, this outcome doesn't require extreme sacrifice. It doesn't require avoiding all enjoyment or rejecting modern life. It simply requires awareness, recognizing that every increase in income presents a choice, not just an opportunity to spend, but an opportunity to decide differently. Because in the end, money doesn't change your life through how much you earn. It changes your life through how much control you keep. And that control is rarely built through big, dramatic decisions. It's built quietly in the moments where you choose not to expand your life just because you can. If this perspective made you think a little differently about money, you can subscribe for more calm, realistic insights like this.